Mr. Secretary, did you invite Elon Musk for a briefing on war plans with China to the Pentagon? Yes or no is simple.
There's been a lot of hyperbole and incorrect reporting around that situation, but we did invite Elon over to come talk to us generally, but there was no war plans being discussed.
Jill Tokuda doesn't come to humor Pete Hegseth. She comes to draw a moral line. In a few precise questions, she forces him to confront the one test no defense secretary should ever sidestep: whether he'd obey an order that turns the military against the American people. And the fact that he refuses to answer, well, that speaks louder than anything he said out loud.
I.e., Mr. Tokuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree we've had many performances today, but what we'd like is some answers. Mr. Secretary, did you invite Elon Musk for a briefing on war plans with China to the Pentagon? Yes or no is simple.
There's been a lot of hyperbole and incorrect reporting around that situation, but we did invite Elon over to come talk to us generally, but there was no war plans being discussed.
Okay, so whose idea was it to invite him to the Pentagon for a briefing? You mentioned you served at the pleasure of the president. Was it the president's will to have him come and be briefed?
Well, as you know, at that time, Elon Musk was leading up DOGE efforts, and we've taken a great investment in DOGE at DOD, and so getting his input on how we make DOD more efficient makes a great deal of sense.
Okay, but don't you think it's a conflict of interest for the world's richest man? Many of the contracts that the DOD is engaged in, billions of dollars of contracts going to his company, and he is, as to your point, was leading DOGE, which was involved in cutting hundreds of contracts, but also becoming intimately aware of the platforms and the requirements that would be given out for new contracts. Did you not think it was a conflict of interest to invite someone with financial interests into the Pentagon to have firsthand knowledge of what they could then bid on for their own, enrichment?
Ma'am, it was just an informal discussion, but I'll tell you, anyone that knows our Defense Department knows we show no preference to any company other than what your capabilities are, and we're grateful for the places where his companies benefit our national defense.
So for a $280 million donation, the world's richest man with companies intimately linked and involved in billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense gained access into the Pentagon. So would you say that any company right now that has multi-billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense has access to the Pentagon right now? 1-hour briefings with you, personally.
On the regular basis,
the answer
I
is
meet with many people and many different companies and many different aspects of our defense industrial base to ensure we have the best possible capabilities. It would be imprudent to do
Well, I'm
otherwise.
sure for an investment of $280 million, Elon's investors are quite happy that it's come out into the billions. I want to jump questions right now. Mr. Secretary, on January 6, 2021, rioters and looters attacked federal law enforcement officials, vandalized and destroyed federal government property, and caused an estimated $2.7 billion in damages right here at the Capitol. Would you have sent the National Guard and the Marines in on that day?
Well, unfortunately, President Trump requested the National Guard in advance, and that was...
It took him quite a long time. I'm asking you, as Secretary of Defense, would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day? We had 140 Capitol Police officers injured. One died the next day. Would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines?
As I said, President Trump directed National Guard to be there in advance.
And I think you can look at the record of how long it actually took for him to actually send them in. But it's good to hear that it sounds like you would have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day in which the insurrection was taking place right here at the Capitol. Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you failed to deny the conclusion that you would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So let me be direct. Given what we are seeing across the country right now, would you carry out or issue an order by the president for our military to fire upon protesters actively engaging in their civil right to exercise free speech, their First Amendment rights? Would you give that order from the president?
I assume you're insinuating what's going on in Los Angeles, and I wouldn't call
Not just
that a
Los
peaceful
Angeles.
protest.
If we take a look at protests throughout the country, it's a simple question. If directed by the president, would you order our military to fire upon protesters? Simple yes or no.
Ma'am, we have, as you know, and as this committee knows, we have standard rules of engagement that are in place that give guidance to our troops, and they abide by them.
I'm asking what you would do. Again, you said you serve at the pleasure of the president. Is that not true?
I do serve at the
So
pledge.
if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as well in your confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Because I refuse to accept a false hypothetical that's attempting to put me in a corner and make it look like a
At
representation.
a time when we have more Marines and
standard
National
rules of
Guard in
engagement
Los
and they are
Angeles than
followed.
we do in Syria and Iran alone, I don't think this is a hypothetical. This is an actual situation that we are dealing with right now. So again, I will ask the question, the last 14 seconds I have, would you order our military to shoot at their fellow countrymen if ordered by the president?
I think it's interesting that for 4 years, insurrection was the left's
I think we
favorite
know your
word,
answer. Thank you, Mr.
and
Chair.
that
I
when
yield
it's
back.
invoked in L.A., they were
Gentlelady yield.
Tokuda's exchange doesn't unfold like a routine oversight hearing. It unfolds like a stress test for American democracy. She isn't interested in polished talking points or polite evasions. She's focused on something far more urgent: whether the people entrusted with national defense still recognize the limits of their own power. She starts by pulling apart the Pentagon's cozy relationship with Elon Musk, not as a personal jab, but as a structural warning. Because when a billionaire whose companies feed off defense contracts gains private access to military decision-makers, the danger isn't theoretical. It's the quiet normalization of influence that should never be for sale. Tokuda shows that this isn't about innovation or efficiency. It's about whether wealth can buy proximity to conversations that shape national strategy. And when that happens, democracy doesn't erode with a bang. It erodes with whispers in closed rooms. But the real gravity of this moment arrives when she shifts to the question no public official should ever dodge: the use of military force against American citizens. She asks plainly whether he would deploy troops to defend the Capitol on January 6th, a moment when law enforcement officers were overwhelmed and democracy itself was under threat. A straightforward commitment would have strengthened public trust. Instead, she gets equivocation, and that hesitation lays bare exactly what she fears. Then comes the defining question: would you follow an order to fire on American protesters? Not hypothetical, not abstract. This is the moral line every democratic system depends on, and once again, the refusal to answer is louder than any statement he could have made. Tokuda exposes a fundamental truth: democratic institutions don't collapse solely from laws being broken. They collapse when powerful figures refuse to say out loud what should be obvious: that the armed forces exist to protect the Constitution, not to enforce the personal will of any president. Her questioning reveals the fragility of these norms. It shows how much depends on the character of the people wielding authority, not just the statutes that govern them. She forces viewers to confront the uncomfortable reality that one evasive answer can signal a mindset where loyalty to leadership outranks loyalty to the rule of law. This is why her line of questioning matters. She's not simply challenging one official. She's defending a principle that determines whether the military remains a shield for democracy or becomes a tool of political pressure. Because once a government becomes comfortable blurring that line, it's the public who pays the price. Tokuda leaves the hearing having done what oversight is meant to do: expose risk, demand clarity, and remind the country that silence from those in power is often its own kind of confession. And in a moment when institutions are being tested across the nation, her message is unmistakable: democracy survives only when the public refuses to ignore the warning signs.